starting right now. And we will start the presentation right now. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this session on intelligent manufacturing. We will be looking at aspects of IoT sensors and digital twins and how together we can be more efficient, more productive, and in particular look at prevention, planning, and looking at that through a visual lens with live sensor data. So Brett is going to be driving the slides here. Brett, can you move to the next slide? We'll introduce the panel speakers. Myself, I'm the CEO of Visual Plan. We are a software company that creates digital twins. We are a collaboration platform that shares information, and we compile various different data sets, including CAD, BIM, etc. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to the other panel speakers and allow them to introduce themselves before their parts of their presentation. So we have Jag from IoT Analytics will be speaking on smart sensors. We have Bavsh Patel from Sanofi, who's the Global Director of Security and Technology. And we have J. Kelly Stewart, who's a security consultant and a Managing Director of Best Way to Capture That Data. We're going to be talking about that today. Next slide. So when we talk about the challenges with digital twins, and really what is a digital twin? You know, a digital twin is a carbon copy, a replica of something physical. It can be a process, it can be other things, but we're going to talk more about physical buildings and assets today. In the past, interoperability has been a real big challenge. You know, BIM works in a certain language, different from CAFM. So all these different ways of recording information don't always talk to each other. That is a challenge. And we may have different versions, and how do we manage that data? We may have data silos. We may have to deal with legacy data. There could be some confusion on what a digital twin is and how we use it, and really how do we gain value out of this? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And what technologies do we deploy to capture, record, and share those digital twins? Because there are some different options out there. And a lot of this is new to various industries, although digital twins are implemented, maybe not as vastly implemented in organizations as they could be. And there are high stakes here, in particular, looking backwards at terrestrial LiDAR, BIM, very expensive processes to capture, produce, and share the data. We're going to talk a little bit about a more cost-effective way to do that through 360 imagery. So I'm going to challenge the norm here, but I can think that we will all agree that if we get it right, the payoff could be huge. So it's good to understand the challenges as we look to implement digital twins or consider them for the first time. Brett? So the goal here is to become more productive, more efficient, reduce costs, reduce time, you know, to look at this through the design, building, and operation maintain stages of a facility life cycle. We want to be able to link the digital with the physical world to have real-time data in sync with existing building data and to maintain building data so it's accurate, so that we can make data-driven decisions, to make good decisions, to again, be more efficient, be more productive, less waste, and to be able to share this data throughout the organization. I guess one of the biggest points here is that we work in these silos and there's a few people that have access to the data when the organization could have a big value by having that data. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the physical CAD world and the different types of data sets. So in the top corner here, a lot of what we do today as service providers of facilities and even with different personnel in a facility department, we work in this land of file share, Dropbox, photographs, digital CAD PDFs, and how to manage that is challenging, or even physical blueprints. If we're fortunate enough to have invested in digital twins through the construction phases, we may have, you know, BIM models, building information models. We may have point clouds and other really valuable data sets that we've invested heavily in. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of these data sets end up on engineering's desktop, or they may be hard to access and hard to find. I even have an experience like that myself I'm going to talk about in this presentation. And then lastly, how do we get this information, not only in a logical, sortable way that we can access it efficiently, but how do we get into our existing operational softwares? So whether it be an FM software, facility management software, CMM software, whatever you're using to manage your data. And we're talking about visual data and 3D data and 2D CAD data. There's a lot more an organization needs to manage with documents, policies, procedures, et cetera. So it is a bigger scope here than what we're going to talk about today. But how do we do this efficiently, and how do we get access to that information quickly, and how do we share it through an organization? And then, on the right here, we have just a screenshot of our software, but how do we use, construction management, project management tools and add visualization, add elements to the process of what we're doing so that we can be a lot more efficient, make less mistakes, have less miscommunication, and overall less issues. Next slide. So I'm going to play this video as a very simple example of a BIM model on the right, showing a specific model design of a HVAC system, and augmenting that reality into the existing structure, or doing some layout. So for plant layout and for basic clash detection, I would say it's more of just where is it and how is it oriented, as opposed to a precision engineering application, whereas LiDAR would be a better focus. And we do host LiDAR as well. So all these data sets come together in the same platform: BIM, 2D data, 3D LiDAR, and 360 imagery. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so another thing we launched actually just today in beta is the ability to bring in the point clouds and to be able to overlay point clouds to 360 imagery into BIM, to be able to measure between them, to be able to reference between them. And what's really critical is the way we bring this platform out to market. It's a super easy, user-friendly platform that is just like a Google Street View, and you can toggle between these different data sets and access them. So we truly have a way to deliver data to an organizational operationally. Okay, next slide. So this is a video as well. So we'll play the video. So looking at preventative maintenance. So one aspect that a lot of facilities would like to do, but it's very time consuming and tedious, is to be able to tag all their assets effectively, to make sure we have make, model, serial numbers, belt sizes, filters, historical information about their assets, especially these assets that we need to maintain. So we have a really quick and easy method to be able to do that, but then this information through a deep link can be then embedded into your existing asset management software through the share link. So be able to take this information and tag it, but then give a little web link to a specific room or a space and have that uploaded to a CAFM software and asset management software. Now we just made something that's really data driven in terms of work orders and data entry to something that's a lot more visual, that gives us context and orientation, measurability, and other aspects of what we're going to be able to see. So really, we need to see it to believe it in a lot of context here. So next slide. So one of the projects we're working on with an interesting company, Punch Alert. There are a number of mass notification softwares being used a lot on campus, hospital campuses and whatnot, where personnel are carrying their mobile device and they can report issues. They can report emergencies, and the reports go out through a text message and they get to the right people quickly so we can respond. So what we're doing with this company, we have a pilot with a university, and we're going to be taking our scans of the buildings and take it right down to a room level, right to a specific room, or in this case, we have some Bluetooth beacons. So take it down to where that beacon level is. It could be a Wi-Fi device, it could be other smart sensors. If we know where those sensors are located in the building, I can give a link to the visual aspects of that point of the tour, and then have those links baked in so that when a notification goes out, you can click to see where you're at. And not only are you at that room, you have the whole tour at your fingertips, but at least you can start from that room. So managing the incidents and be able to send announcements, to receive tips through those deep links embedded into platforms or industry apps. And this is just one example. And Jeg, our next speaker, is going to talk about smart sensors and how things like humidity and sound and all these other types of real-time data points that we get from a data analytics software, how can they bridge the gap from looking at dials to looking at the actual facility? Next slide. So this is an interesting example. We're working with a company called Precision Aerial that does a lot of work in the oil and gas. So this is a photographed 3D tour of the oil tanks. So they have to clean out these tanks and go through them. And there's usually an inspection process. They're doing a deviation analysis with a LiDAR. They're looking through the thickness of the tanks. And that must be done with LiDAR and through a process. But there's still a visual component where the imagery is providing a ton of value. So right now we have the picture of the tank inside. We have the annotations on the left. We have the point cloud that I've just basically did a screenshot. Now, can I tell you why? My experience. Now, I came from Faro. I came from the LiDAR space. I know how to deal with point clouds. So I asked for the point clouds of this project. I get them in a Dropbox folder. I get 26 files. Okay, now what I have to do, I go to Faro, I get a demo version of the Faro Scene software. I download that, I process them. It takes me 8 hours, baked it on my business computer, and 8 hours later, I got something partially processed. I try to create the point cloud. I try to get the recap file. And what happens, I get frustrated. Why? Because I don't have the Alienware computer, the $5,000 computer I used to have. So I'm not able to get that data in properly. So it is one of the examples of challenges we have with this complex data, whether it be BIM or point clouds or other, and it's hard to be able to share and see and to be able to compare those data sets. Obviously, I'm going to get this in later this afternoon, but I thought it was an interesting story to share here. Go ahead. So the other thing we can look at is autonomous capture, especially in hazardous environments or in repeated capture situations where we want to repeat an action over and over again. We have integrated with Boston Dynamics Spot Dog. So these robots on the right, the yellow one here, we can train those robots to do repeated functions and to have our capture imagery taken from the dog and be able to do that over time. We also work with drone data. So whether it is a drone point cloud that we brought in or a topo mosaic image that's created from a drone, or whether we're taking 360 cameras and actually putting them on the drones and flying them in different areas to collect 3D data and to ingest them and to be able to visualize them. And there are other types of autonomous vehicles, right down to just getting an RC car. And what I like to say, I'm a MacGyver and be able to place a camera on it. And as long as we're within about 150 feet, we're in a crawl space and I want to be able to get access. It's a really kind of fun and easy way to get access and do that. The nice thing about what we're doing with the 360 imagery is the cameras that we're using, the hardware we're using is about a $500 to $1,000 camera. So extremely disruptive in terms of rolling something out nationally. You have 100 facilities, you want to capture them. That's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. Next slide. So a couple industry examples. We're working with a company called Ionasia that do a lot of work in Asia, in Hong Kong and mainland China with multinational companies. One of the challenges that we're seeing right now with COVID is we can't just fly out to these facilities and do site walks. So with James over at Ionasia, we just did a project a couple of weeks ago with a large transportation company and scanning that and doing a quality and safety risk inspection. We were able to take the standard industry forms they use and to create those into actual annotations that we could annotate physically into the visualization and to extract that information into a spreadsheet and into a report. So, we work creatively with clients now, whether it be a maintenance application or a risk assessment or a quality safety inspection, and look at different ways that we can virtually walk through and tag items and to identify issues, but more than that, to get on a virtual environment like we're doing today and to be able to have other perspectives on a problem, to be able to have a critical thinking exercise to be able to determine the best results and the best answers to the problems that we're facing. Next slide. So another company we work with is Butchko Inc. and ESI Convergent. They put together a really cool package on helping companies get back to work. So the steps process here, social distancing, testing, entrance assessment policies, and stay at home, work from home, is really dependent on facility information to do their job. But again, they themselves can't always get to the facilities. So the way we're working with them is we have local people to be able to capture data, to create digital twins, and for them to be able to assess virtually to give feedback, and then even to place different descriptive elements within the 3D environment to show and stage social distancing and testing and sanitation and things like that. So I do suggest if you're a corporation looking to open, to reach out to these guys. They got a great program. It's very cost effective, and they definitely know what they're doing. Next slide. Also, Bavsh, we have you on the line. I actually want to ask a quick question here during my presentation, because you brought up to me the other day that you are going through an acquisition, that you did this remotely because you couldn't fly out to site. I put some bullet points on some of the things that are typically involved in an MMA virtual asset audit, but I'd love to hear from your perspective what was involved, and if visualization, a virtual walkthrough would have helped with that process, and what risk you might mitigate having that in hands. And also that we are hopefully going to do that building for you this next week to give you some reflection on that.
No, I agree. I think with this process, not to be able to fly during COVID here, having that visualization of the facility gives you a whole new perspective. As we're walking through the assessment process, whether it's in physical space, cyberspace, and chemical lab area, to get you visualize where things are located, where they are, what type of equipment it is, what condition the equipment it is in. The idea behind it is that, yes, you do have an assessment, you have documentation, and you have people describing what that looks like, but actually visualizing it, and then ability, depending on how long where we can't fly, the ability to have that and share that among other teams, and using it our GSOC for the references when we start supporting it. I mean, for us, as soon as acquisition occurs, we're supporting the site, and it's a huge difference between where we fully integrated to a non-integrated site. And so have that visibility and ability to communicate that seamlessly across multiple staff, multiple GSOCs. It helps through that whole process. Beyond that, going through each one of the bullet you kind of represented here, it does help us cover that through our other partnerships with HSC and facilities. So it's a whole new perspective, new way of working.
Excellent. I appreciate your feedback. Thanks, Brett. Do you want to move to the next slide here? So I think with that in mind, I think what we need to do is broaden our understanding of how and who is using a digital twin. The traditional thinking is that it's engineering and construction that use 3D models to create, design, build things, but there really is such a much greater value on an operational aspect. And in the case for this application Bavsh was talking about, we have executives that are involved, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, health and safety, even chief counsel, and all these individuals have a stake in the visual information about the facilities that they need to be responsible for, the processes that are responsible. They need to collaborate and understand. So to be able to have a single source of truth, or even multiple data sets that give you that perspective, to be able to see it, to prove it, to confirm it, to believe it, to protect it, to prevent it, to fix it, teach it, etc. There's many different stakeholders. So I think one of the key things about digital twins is getting that information to the organization, and those also outsiders that are responsible for the facility, but also to do that in a safe way. We're managing our IP, we're controlling the data in a safe way that it doesn't get in the wrong hands. Last slide. So kind of in summary, the aspects of the conversation with Industry 4.0 that I think are really relevant to my part of the presentation are the focus on net-centric and the cloud-based ability to take complex data, and then data that we're capturing on a frequent basis. The 360 imagery is what I'm referring to, which we might capture on some projects daily or weekly, or even SLAM or drone data that could be captured on a frequent basis to give us that monitoring aspect, and to be able to also look at to industry standards and forms, and how do we integrate that, how do we annotate, how do we get multiple teams of stakeholders involved and looking on something virtual to simulate, and also to change directions, and to be able to look at things differently, to look at handheld sensor data and to be able to tag that spatially. that sort of thing. And then the second part, really, I think in summary, is about the industry apps and to try to think out of the box, right? It's not just that we have a 3D model or a 360 images. How do we connect those with other business processes? Like the example I given you with the emergency management, getting text messages out to people, but that's limited. What other information is valuable for them visually to be able to respond effectively? And then especially in the predictive and the prescriptive maintenance, especially when we start to involve AI, we have a sensor going off on a piece of machinery. It's going to heat up, and it's somewhere in this 4 million square foot facility, and someone has to respond. So how do we respond the first time with the right tools, the right parts, and go directly to that machine and make sure that we resolve the problem quickly? And by doing that, having data queries and email triggers to go out and to do this in an automated fashion. But thank you for your time. I'm going to change the conversation now to Jag, who's going to talk a little bit about smart sensors and give us some feedback there. But thank you. Jag?
Thanks, Kelly. So thanks for the discussion on the digital twins. Today we're going to talk about intelligent manufacturing, IoT, and digital twins. How do we use IoT and digital twin not only to make data-driven decisions, but also using real-time data? So quick agenda is we'll do an IoT overview, followed by an Industry 4.0 and manufacturing. Some use cases, we'll talk about it, and we'll also have a small device demo we put together for this team. And we'll talk about what's the value prop for IoT and digital twin. Quick introduction, I'm one of the co-founders of IoT to Analytics, founded in 2019. Our focus is logistics and as well as manufacturing using Industry 4.0. We have partners with wide area of experience, over 150 years. Our core thing is provisioning of customized IoT solutions. Expertise in cloud and as well as in edge computing. Invested heavily on devices, sensors, gateways, advanced analytics and stuff like that. Some of the things we have put together today, we'll talk through it. We also have an overseas development center for devices and sensors. With me today will be Brett, who's basically a business development manager at Visual Plant. And he has been in the 18 years in the facility and manufacturing environment. He'll be helping me out. He got 7 years in 3D LiDAR and the meteorology industry. He also has an expertise in software and capital industry as well. So let's do a quick IoT overview. What is an IoT? And many of you guys might have heard of this one. IoT stands for Internet of Things. Basically, it's physical digital devices with sensors and sensors to collect and share data, right? Generally, you can either have a sensor, a separate, or you can have a gateway which basically consolidates the information from all the sensors. Either it could be Wi-Fi or a cellular connected devices. You can have either a cloud-based solution or an edge-based, depending upon your applications and stuff like that. Collecting, consolidating the information, and to tracking any of your assets. So basically what it's going to provide is if you have any assets, any physical assets, which you want to track, and you want to connect their dependability and their variability in their functions and how they are functioning as of right now. So you're connecting through all these sensors and using cloud and edge to collect the data, and then you analyze the data. So if we look from these, one of the references I have at the bottom here is if you look at what are the reasons for adoption, if you see it, operation optimization, that's the biggest. 56% is operation optimization, followed by employee productivity. But the biggest one is supply chain management. That's the core area we are focusing on, supply chain management and as well as operation optimization. And another big thing in IoT, you guys might have constantly hear about it, this happens every day, is the security. So the devices, if you look at it, these are the different levels of security and how you can secure devices and those kind of stuff. Even in our portfolio, our security is pretty high on the table, and we have different layers of security of securing your devices and sensors and gateways. One of the things I also want to talk about today is about the challenges. If you look at the challenges, the complexity itself is it's a very big one. If you talk to any of your customers and stuff like that, their lack of budget is another one, and staff and lack of knowledge is another one too. But the biggest challenge is, hey, I have an IT infrastructure, I have BI, some kind of analytics and all this kind of stuff. In terms of IT, I'm good, but coming to converging OT infrastructure to IT, that's where my biggest challenge is. I don't know where to start it. Sensors and gateways are all creating a lot of challenges for me in terms of skill sets, infrastructure placements, security, network issues, and all those kind of stuff. That's one of the biggest challenges we always face when we talk to customers, day in and day out. So that's one of the things is we came up with a plan of implementation. We have a 12-point program, which starts with, assessments, POC, and then, putting some kind of project timeline and setting up the environment. When I talk about this environment, it's just not IT environment. If you're doing it in the warehouse or you're doing the plant or in the manufacturing, the setting up that environment for IoT devices itself, it's a task by itself. And of course, cloud and security, and as well as training and those kind of. So this is a 12-point program, which we highly, keep the highest priority to our customers when we talk through any implementation. This is one of the things we'll go into detail on that one with the customers. Thank you. Industry 4.0 in manufacturing. I just found this one definition which really hits the nail there. It's basically, what is Industry 4.0? It's a marriage of physical assets with digital technologies to analyze and act with real-time data. That makes more sense, especially using IoT and digital twin. So if you look from some of the components, what we use to do these Industry 4.0 towards manufacturing, if you look at it from the, I'm going to go from left to right. If you see that the inputs is basically your assets. It could be any type of assets, high value assets. This could be a pump, your compressor, it could be a gearbox, or it could be something in transit. You're moving a very expensive pharmaceutical drug from point A to point B, and you want to constantly track all the environmental conditions like temperature, pressure, and all those kind of stuff. So those are your high value assets. The next comes to sensors. So now you basically want to know is what is that thing you really want to track? Are you tracking using just their existence, using some kind of RFID technology, or you're measuring some current, or or smoke alarm, or you have a temperature, or you even have proximity sensors. So different types of sensors come into play. So given we are a customized IoT solution, these are some of the things we talk to the customers. Each and every bucket, we basically sit and talk to them, right? Then followed by devices. And now once you have your sensors picked, now we want to think about what kind of devices you want. Do you want edge devices, or you want just trackers, or you have some IO modules to be connected? Those are the things also goes into making of these IoT platform or IoT infrastructure. Then comes the connectivity. How do you connect to a physical device to a cloud or to an edge environment? There are different types of connectivity, MQTT, Modbus, and all kinds of stuff are there. Once you come to that level, now once you've collected that information in the devices, now you need to either put it in the cloud or you put it in your edge devices itself. So different cloud services also come into play, IoT hubs, streaming analytics, and as well as some data transformation. If there is any alert notification, like what Kelly was mentioning, some of the things will also come into play. Once you've collected the information, now you have it probably in a single source of truth. Maybe you have some kind of data warehousing, or you have some kind of big data infrastructure and those kind of stuff. What do you do with it? The first and foremost, generally people do is, streaming analytics. I want to stream the data and I want to see the data as of right now, what's going on, followed by some kind of alert notification on exceptionals. We do that. And then once you have that, then what do we do with it? I mean, can we use it for predictive analytics and all this stuff? That's where you get into, the state of health, anomaly detection, and those kind of stuff. I have a small use case which we worked on it. I'll talk to you guys in the next slide. And once you have the data, now you basically go and say, how do I integrate the data to my existing ERP solution? So let's say, for example, I have something in transit. I know where that asset is right now, but how do I make sure that it is being shipped out or it's being delivered? And how do I flag my ERP's shipment status? So that's where you integrate it too. So this kind of gives you a holistic view about how all these components of IoT combine together and provide a solution and make sense out of this Industry 4.0. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a small POC. My partner and myself, we did that last year. So we had an asset which we wanted to identify and track some core parameters of this one. Here in this one, we were monitoring current, vibration, temperature, and humidity, and trying to calculate this OEE, which is overall equipment effectiveness, and how you can use that OEE and as well as data, as well as machine quality, and as well as the machine hours and those kind of stuff. How do you do a proactive equipment maintenance? And how do you reduce your inventory of spare parts? And can you do some kind of predict your remaining usefulness of a motor or a pump or those kind of stuff? The picture, what you guys see is this was a real-time picture at that time. We calculated, we have a streaming data coming in. I think we had it like every I think it was every 30 seconds or something like that. We were calculating the data, this one. And any exceptions happens of this one is basically sends an alert notification to your email or to your phone number, just something like that. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is another, if you look at it, this one, this is another fallout of our POC type experiment, what we were doing. You can see the machine availability by run hours, by different types of machines. We had 2 different machines there. And also we had how was the manufacturing performance was doing. We were using some binary keys to collect that. Mostly, generally these type of information will come from some kind of infrastructure which is already placed in PLC or SCADA or something like that. Information was coming in. And then you also see quality by hour. So you basically identify, some of the products what you have. Was that a rework and those kind of stuff, and then eventually we calculate OEE by hour. This is how we you're able to see how good the performance is on the manufacturing on the shop floor at that moment of time. And if there is any changes on this one, we will definitely alert them, the supervisor on the floor and those kind of stuff. The slide on the rightmost is what we were trying to do, predicting the remaining useful of life using AI. We were not able to do at that time, but that's something we will do going forward as well. Next slide, please. This is another example of what we collected the data from the OE from the IoT devices. And we did some clustering analysis, and as well as did some machine learning and did some scoring and saying, how good the data is and where the spikes are, when the exceptional happens, how did we do it? These kind of scenarios can be done either using a cloud device, or you can actually even do edge computing. And for this one, we used linear and 2-class logistic regression to do scoring. So depending upon the customer needs, these can be done, like I said, either the cloud level or with the edge level as well too. Next slide. This is another example which we've been working with the customers. This is basically for warehousing and plant, for any digital assets which are constantly moving either in plant or in transit. The assets here is what we call it some kind of gaylord, or you can call it the tote. These assets and totes are being identified, and they are being tagged with smart sensors. And these tags and sensors talk to our gateway devices, and constantly we monitor their presence where they are. These sensors, which are assigned to these gaylords and totes, can have multiple different types of sensors. They can have a temperature sensor, a humidity sensor, or even have a vibration sensor. But this was one of the pharmaceuticals we were working with, where we collect that information. Like I think we were collecting every 15 minutes, collect the information and send it to the cloud infrastructure, and we integrated it into their existing solution as well. Thank you. This is another use case which we are working with Visual Plan along with digital twins. So you saw some of the things what Kelly talked about is in digital twins. How do we take advantage of streaming data and combine with the digital twin? How do you make user feel like they can go into this Visual Plans data set and look at streaming data right there and then? Let's say, for example, these are some of the use cases here. So one of the things is if you have an asset like a robotics here, and you have flagged that asset for some kind of vibration sensor or multiple even vibration sensor or in some kind of even some temperature sensor also you can have it, or some location-based sensors you have it. And then you basically go into Visual Plan's software and say, hey, give me a list of all the robots which needs calibration, because those data attributes of those robots already been captured as part of the sensor rollout. So you will have the metadata characteristics of those robots, or if it's a battery here, you want to find out how many assets are being used and where they are using this kind of battery. Or if you want to see, hey, I want to see all this two-stage air compressor, where are they placed at? Given these assets are tagged with those sensors, and these sensors and the stream is constantly streaming data, you will be able to visually go into Visual Plan and look at live data sets and query the data set just like a street view in a Google. So that's one of the things we have been working with Visual Plan to do to see how we can enrich with these solutions and make it more visually connected to the users as well. So sure, somebody asked, is it possible to get a keep screenshot? Sure, we can definitely share it. Another thing is also use cases for healthcare. If you look at it, this is on the left side is a portable MRI. And these are high value assets, and you have an X-ray machine, or you have this bed, or you even have air quality given this COVID situation, what we have, or you want to see what is the utility usage in a given corridor. All those things can be tracked with different IoT sensors and the gateway to collect that information along with real-time data. With Visual Plan, you'll be able to see it. Hey, what's going on right now? Can you see it? Where is the asset right now? What's the utilities usage for the past 1 hour or for the past 12 hours and those kind of stuff. So next slide, please. This is another example of oil and gas shipyards. So if you look at it, tracking personnel and assets. So any asset, if it could be just a personnel, we just hand over the small tags which constantly, talks to some kind of cellular connected gateways, and you will be able to track and see where this person is right now. And as well as used for evacuation routes in case of emergency. How do you want to get out in case of some kind of emergencies happen? So these are some of the examples which we will continue to work with Visual Plan, and as well as IoT analytics as well. Next slide, please. This is a demo which Brett is going to show how all these things put together will work to show a real streaming data.
Yeah, all right, thanks, Jag. Yeah, I'm going to explain what we got. This is a little bit of the more fun part. We get to kind of put these devices in action. And so what we got here is we're on a rooftop inside a Visual Plan of a rooftop 5-story building. You're looking at the GIS interface satellite view, and we also inside a Visual Plan have the ability to have like a street view as well, so we can toggle between the two. And so just wanted to give you a little bit of a 360-degree viewpoint here on top of the roof, and we're actually going to be inside of that building there on the top. I'm kind of scrolling around for a second to give you a different view and show you what Visual Plan can kind of do for you. And so now what we've done is we have 3 devices that are active and 3 annotations that we set up. This is the pump room in the mechanical room here on the roof, and basically just wanted to give you a 360 just viewpoint of it. But what we've done is we put the devices by the pump, and we've linked the URL to that device inside a Visual Plan, which I just clicked, and now you can see we're going to be going to the data analytics page or the dashboard. And what you're seeing here is in real time, the temperature, the humidity, the pressure. It's customizable to whatever you would like, whether it be vibration or light or what have you. Skipping back to Visual Plan, you can see inside the annotation, we can put whatever asset information we want, whether it's a photo of a nameplate, any links, notes, markups that you would want for that asset, right? Moving to the second device, which is in the compressor area right down from the pumps. As you can see the pumps in the background there. Just kind of scrolling around for a second, want to give you that visual feel. And by clicking again on the URL on the annotation, we're going to, again, go right to that dashboard, and it's going to give us that live reading. We're actually collecting data every 3 seconds there. So we're able to provide some real-time data to detect any sort of problems that may arise. So now we're flipping to the chiller room on the roof. And in this case, I'm going to click on the URL, and we're going to go to a report this time, which is going to compile all 3 of those devices on a graphical interface that's going to pop up here in a second. And it's going to chart all 3 of those devices together for us and show, how they're doing together. And you can kind of see over here in the temperature location, it looks like we got a spike on a temperature for that chiller area. And so if I do a refresh, you'll kind of see it refresh for us. And of course, you can see there we've got another anomaly. So what this could show us is, hey, we got maybe a problem going on in our facility. And at that point, I can verify and go back to the actual data dashboard, just verify what that temperature is. If it's too high, then we can share this information to whatever stakeholder that we would need, right? Whether it be the engineering department or the maintenance department. We can share in real time all the information visually, right directly to those individuals, and they will know where it is, what's going on, what tools or what items they need to bring to possibly fix it and or take care of that issue. So that's the power that we can provide within Visual Plan, and just the power by linking those devices and possibly getting some remote troubleshooting happening, what we can do inside of Visual Plan moving forward. So, Jag, I'll go to the next slide. You can wrap it up for us.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So the value prop, adoption of Industry 4.0 as part of your digital transformation journey. Then solution implementation using IoT and digital twins. I think that's where the enrichment comes in, where you can take data-driven decisions, not just with the real-time and streaming data, and different types of technologies, either cloud and edge computing, as well as advanced analytics like machine learning in terms of how do you react, and as well as how do you predict before an exception scenario happens. What does it all means to the supervisors or to the stakeholders? And this one is definitely higher throughput and efficiencies, highest OEEs and lesser reworks and scraps. And at the same time is real-time monitoring with contextual shop floor information. So you're looking at the shop floor, complete shop floor within the digital twin using Visual Plan software along with the streaming data. So like I said, once you have a notification come into you, which is all will be part of the IoT device setup, and you can definitely go to this one place and say, hey, what is this coming from? What's going on there? I can see, yeah, that's an issue right there. The temperature is spiking up in this particular one. And at the same time, it also allows you to create, given the digital twin is there, you also have attribute collection as part of the IoT for all your assets. So replicating this particular environment, or whatever you want to call your plant, into another location, you can do that because IoT devices already have information about their assets in the attributes as part of metadata. And extending the solution beyond predictive and using digital process twins, it will be the next logical step. So those are some of the things I had to offer. So
Great.
I think the next speaker will be Kelly.
Kelly Stewart. Yeah, thanks very much, Jag and Brett. Appreciate that. Just for the audience, we're running a little bit over time. That's fine. We are going to continue for the full presentation. We might go just over with our Q&A, but just to give everyone a heads up. But Kelly, take it away.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Kelly Stewart here, Managing Director and CEO of Newcastle Consulting, which is a security risk management consultancy situated in Washington, D.C. I've been going at this whole security thing for about 30 years with various agencies in the government as well as in the private sector. But let's get into what I'm going to take the perspective of is, since I'm a security consultant, what exactly are we looking with what the title is, prevention and planning, on the aspect of going through the process, what you've seen is the technology that assists us in looking at things, but why is that important? Why is that important for you in terms of what you do, and how do you communicate that also back to your executive team in terms of where you want to go with things, with whatever you're doing? Next slide, please. The big portion of what I do is risk, threat, and vulnerability assessments for my consultancy, but it concentrates and focuses in on what exactly are we trying to plan towards? What are we trying to prevent? Obviously, the crux of it is security based. So what I'm looking at is identifying all those assets. And that's why the digital twin piece, go back. I don't know why it switched. The digital twin piece allows that aspect of being able to identify those assets, analyze them correctly, and also see the threats and the vulnerabilities involved. So it gives a better examination considering the visual aspect of that. And then you're able to put in some countermeasures. So next slide, please. The goal of any kind of assessment when we're looking at it is essentially prevention. But what you're trying to do is ensure that you're having a clear understanding of what those risks, what those vulnerabilities are, and what kind of countermeasures you want to put into place. Next slide. Now, the whole piece of that key is understanding those things, but being able to put that in a logical format so you're not only assessing countermeasure effectiveness, but also cost effectiveness. Because the cost effectiveness piece of this is where we want to put things in regard to the executive team. So as an assessor, you're looking at all these things and what does that do for the company in terms of them going and achieving their objectives? And that's how you're tying a lot of this in. The next slide that you're going to see here is actually a video, but it gives you a whole aspect of what Kelly as well as Jag has been talking about with a 360-degree situational awareness viewpoint. So what you're trying to do is, and we'll wait, I think the video started or no?
There it is. It's not starting, Kelly. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let me describe what the video is going to show you is essentially a 360-degree view, but a quick shot in some of the videos you've seen, but give you an understanding of when you're going through and touring the facility or the manufacturing plant that you're looking at, you're going to distinctive areas where there may be vulnerabilities, may be threats, and have a clear picture or 360-degree view and understanding of what that is. And then putting together a plan of what kind of countermeasures do I have to put in place? What kind of things, devices or the like, do I have to put in to ensure that those aspects remain safe? Now, next slide. When Kelly briefly touched upon the whole aspect of data sharing. So when you're sharing a lot of this data, it's actually, how does that get compiled? How is it more efficient? How is it more effective for everyone to see? What you're able to do through these aspects is actually use technology to your benefit, and everyone can collaborate in terms of, okay, this is how I want to annotate certain things. This is where I want a device, either a camera, card reader, or whatever kind of security device you want to put in. And this is what it will affect. It'll prevent this from happening. So you're able to do that in live in real time. And in this particular instance, next slide, one client that we're doing this for is U.S. Postal Service when we're looking at one of their facilities and how we capture that. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the facility itself, but on the right-hand side, we have a tour of each point that you're going to hit in and around their facility. I would like to obviously to give you that live, but right now that can't be done. But you've seen that through other examples already presented through the other two presenters. What you're able to do is follow in a pathway of, what am I looking at? I have my entire facility. I need to cover it in such a way virtually, but also logically, so that I can put in the proper devices, proper protection measures, and our facility is covered from a threat and a vulnerability standpoint. Next slide. So let's think about this for a second. And where I wanted to go with this is bring it back. Since I've held positions as a practitioner and a consultant, my perspective is one that emphasizes the practical and pragmatic results for a risk assessment. So what am I looking for? I know that when a security practitioner needs from the results of an assessment and carry that into consulting for mid-size and large cap corporations. But I am asking these questions, as you can see here on the screen. What are my principal goals? You already know some person has a gap that exists. So I'm able to identify those things quickly and able to communicate that in such a fashion to the executives as, well, this is what areas we're going to cover. This is what we're going to improve upon. And then some of the other things, how does this change the deliverable? Well, it changes the deliverable from a static report to essentially a very complex and interactive report, one that can be digital, one that can be inclusive of each and every person on the executive team or whoever you're reporting to, because they can see not so much in real time, but digitally as to, okay, this is what I'm viewing, this is what I'm seeing. And then it's not just a static picture or words in a report. This is what it actually looks like. So how powerful is that? That allows the person to actually get benefit and value from, okay, this is what you're interpreting and this is what you mean by what you're communicating to me. Next slide. So again, what I'm trying to do, we're thinking of things and your outcomes differently. Because of that experience, what kind of deliverable, and Kelly alluded to this in terms of how the executives get involved. What exactly is the driver? What is their risk factor? And this is where you cover a lot of these things with the C-level people. And as I say, they come together for CSTAT depending on what's important to your organization. And for them, it's a prioritization of investment. So what you're proving at the end of the day through what we're doing from an assessment is, okay, from a priority way, what am I going to invest and what am I going to give security or any other department based upon the certain things that I've seen with the software that allows me to see every aspect of what I'm doing. Next slide. So what are kind of questions you'd be asking not only the consultant who you have or the person that's doing your security or even your safety or even the manufacturing piece? Is there a clear distinction and understanding of risk, threat, and vulnerability assessment? Meaning, do you understand that process? Have they educated you on it? I personally believe, considering we're hand in hand and using a lot of the digital twin and visual plan software, it is a better communicator of having and helping people understand what really is a threat, what really is a risk on their campus or on their facility. And then, can any of the risks identified align with our overall corporate risk factors? So typically with a publicly traded company, which some manufacturing entities are, you look to the 10K or 10Q in terms of understanding what their risk factors in. And then you insert that aspect into how you display your message with regard to your report. Because it is critical for them to understand, obviously, this is how you'll handle that aspect of risk. And again, they're going to be deciding the risk factor, whether or not they'll mitigate it or accept it, but you give them that ability to do so more effectively and more efficiently. And then I think one of the other things I want to point into is, will my recommendations be prioritized based on a risk level or a cost factor? That's what you're trying to prove in this preventative and planning stage of things. Again, it's separating the tool from what actually you also have to communicate through a process. How will that be? What will you consider? What will you get into in terms of the discussions? How will that be displayed? And then finally, will my recommendations include a planner, which I think from visually seeing everything, you can actually put in a detailed planner of what's your first step and where we want to go. Because again, the picture is 1,000 words, and you're able to actually visually see each of the aspects of what you're doing regarding a security measure when you're going through an assessment. Next slide. So this is a slide I typically use with a lot of my clients in terms of a recent presentation where I'm presenting risk factors identified in their 10K statement against a security program that could be used to mitigate those risks. So for those not familiar, each publicly traded company is required to file an annual 10K, like I said, and then they're supposed to put in their risk there. So what I'm trying to do is align those parameters with what kind of security program mitigation I'm going to do. Now, think of it from this way. I put this into the aspect of what I'm presenting, but then I also have the visual and the 360-degree view of what they're actually looking at and what it means to them in their operation. So our goal here is operational effectiveness. But what are we doing in essence? We're actually helping them plan and helping them prevent any kind of mayhem with regard to their business and ensuring that if they get into a crisis or if they get into any kind of trouble, we can be rest assured that these things will be covered based upon what we've already given them and how this will go. Next slide. So written report, presentation, both. This is kind of what I already alluded to in terms, what are you going to display to them? Typically, it's always been a handwritten or a presentation of sorts. Now you have the ability to give it to them in maybe augmented reality or in a tour where they can visually see certain things. And you can annotate that tour as Brett has indicated of, okay, what is the concern here? What do I have to take care of? How is that going to get taken care of? And then a combination of technology with how you traditionally present things can be done a lot more succinctly. And I believe it's probably a little bit more powerful in terms of what you do. And then finally, you can also, with the dashboard, next slide, give them something like this. And this is typically what I want to do for or a lot of my club is this is a sample planner, but is to provide a visual what I'm talking about in terms of what's high risk, what's the cost, where and when we've seen these things, and what exactly we're going to be doing. Because it gives you a whole aspect of, here's what I found out. Here's what the recommendation is. Here's what the cost factor is going to be. And here's a level of priority for what you want to do. So, well, what can you do with that information? That information allows you to then indicate, okay, well, I'll take care of the high priority items. I don't have to worry about too much on the moderate and the low priority items. But then I'm able to budget, I'm able to plan, and I'm able to put things in logical sequence based upon my findings. But I can also do that visually because I now have a 360-degree view of what I'm looking at with regard to the actual manufacturing plant, as opposed to before it's just a snapshot in a report. And I don't know how meaningful it is because I don't get perspective and context as to where exactly that point of reference is. And that's it.
I was on mute there. Thanks very much. So I want to change this to a panel discussion. Again, we're going to go over just a little bit today, but it's really critical we get some feedback from our guest speaker, Bavsh Patel. So Bavsh, based on the presentations here, you want to provide a little insight from your perspective, managing numerous facilities globally. One of the bigger pharmaceutical companies responsible for some very key assets. What is your perspective on digital twins and IoT and where this all kind of comes together?
Yeah, I was hoping I was going to find my twin here, but I didn't. But I think, if you look at all the components that's just went through, you looked at what Kelly presented from his years of experience from a reporting perspective, from a management perspective, where I've managed over from 300 to 800 buildings in multiple countries. You're not going to have ability to visit each one of these sites. So think about it and depends on the maturity of your security program from start to finish. So from a project management perspective to really trying to manage it from a pandemic or crisis perspectives, ability to have that visualized from of the sites to take it into sort of the IO component of having real time. So give you an example where we have one of our key manufacturing, it is state of the art. It is the new way of thinking, where we have, once we have that visualized and the visualized plan, we can now actually see everything and look at everything from the outside perspective. I can see the cabling, I can see everything because some of these areas you can't access once it's live in production. You have to wait a year or 2 years for you to support those areas because you can't contaminate the space. To a business continuity perspective, exercises where you can actually look at visualize a building and tie it all in, say, okay, here's the impact, visualize the impact essentially, right, of what that means for your site, and take that from a virtual tabletop exercise where you have people represented from a global point of view who's never been to the facility. And the biggest challenge when you look at it from a global is vocabulary. and terminology. We don't all speak English, and if we do speak English, it's not the same English. So the words means different, but visualize what you're seeing, and it eliminates all those misunderstanding or translations, right? And you can now visualize the impact to the facility. Now you can create a proper business continuity plan around this. So we think about it from a tabletop exercise to real. Hopefully nobody has to go through it, but real live exercise or real life scenarios that you might have to live through. So walking from a building construction, or in our case, what I spoke about earlier, an acquisition, to take that and have a real live access to it, and sort of work our assessment process through that using the experience that we have, and say, okay, this is what I see, here's what it is. They can actually have much better questioning to the team on the ground who just became part of your new family, and you can have a much more interactive conversation to understand what you're seeing versus what they saw. You have an understanding of what your requirements are, and really translating those from your own set of eyes sitting miles and miles away. So it really, for me, being a practitioner in the corporate arena, looking at this from start to finish and visualizing it, even to a point, I would say, taking this product and operationalizing it right into your GSOC, for ability to see alarms, ability to see a video image, and then actually see what else is around that could be impacted if you have an incident when you don't have a PTZ or 360 camera, um, to including ability to integrate the robots and drones. We already have facilities that we're operating drones on. Hopefully we'll be doing robots soon, but ability to kind of incorporate that and get that other aspect of visualization that you don't typically get. This allows you to take all those into it and have an ability to make an educated decision on what you need to do. To me, it's endless capabilities, right? It's up to you to decide how this fits into your arena. But the fact that the old saying, "Pictures worth thousands of words," here it is, right? Take it, and you can now see it. You can now see the IoT. You can see the robotics aspect of it. You can see the assessment aspect of it. What Kelly kind of just talked about. We all been through, getting stacks of report, and 90% of the time those report end up in some sort of a cabinet and we'll never even look at, right? But especially if I get it from Kelly, I'll definitely look at it. But if I were to show my leadership and visualize and say, hey, here, these red areas, this is what it means. This is the impact. They would have a whole new perspective. You might be able to get funding faster in your challenges that you have within your organization. But that's that whole idea around visualizing uh, the entire process of your portfolio. We look at security from a holistic point of view, from people, information, and product. So we have physical security, cybersecurity, we have product security, business continuity, crisis management, and insider threat. So you look at all those elements and ability to incorporate that into a visualized plan that I can show to my leadership, and then my GSOC having that capability.
Thanks, Bavsh. I appreciate that feedback. I know you do have another meeting you got to run, so if you need to sign off, that's okay. We're going to move to the next question now. Brett, next slide. Oh, it's for me. So how do digital twins help with decentralization of access and flow of information and intelligence? I think each of the speakers kind of talked to this, this sharing of information. But I think that, the platform that we're using, or whether it's a SaaS-based platform that anyone can open to be able to verify and validate rather than speculate or have to visually go out on site to validate in person, I think is really tremendous. And I really love what Bavsh was just talking about with language. It's actually not something I really kind of thought about, but we even have, a customer in Colombia, and we're dealing with translation issues. But once we get into visual and we can point to something, being able to see something is universal, and it is something that we can all agree on when we look and point at something to understand it. Even though we come from a different perspective or an expertise, it is kind of a universal language that seeing is believing. So I think that was really interesting, and I think really important too is to kind of bake in the real-time sensor data and getting different types of data sets that are valuable if they have some type of localized or kind of specific location that we're referencing when we're talking about them and how it relates to the larger building. But thanks. Next slide. I think it's going to Jag. So Jag, how are digital twins a benefit for enterprises embracing IoT solutions today, and what challenges exist? And then I got a quick follow-up from one of our audience members after that.
Yeah, so definitely, yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks, Kelly. So how are digital twins benefit for enterprise embracing solutions today? Yeah. So the question is, when we go to our customers and we talk through, different kind of solutions and stuff like that, they wanted to see in real context. You know what I'm saying? So I got the streaming devices. There are a lot of IoT solutions available, but in terms of looking at real context, let's say with the digital twin, I have an asset and I want to track the asset's performance. And also I have multiple plants all over the world. And I'm collecting as part of the IoT device, I'm also collecting some metadata characteristics of all these assets. So one thing is I want to track how the assets are functioning or operational. That's one thing. And second is in terms of contextual health information, I just want to query some information about these assets towards something's coming for calibration or something coming for audit. How do I see where all these things are placed at? It's simple like a Google Street View. You just want to go and say, hey, show me a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, or an Italian restaurant near me. It's same concept, right? You collect the data, and those data is being part of the IoT digital twin, what we call, is actually device twin, sorry, device twins. We collect that information, we house all these metadata characters as part of the device twin, and make it available in Visual Plan like digital twin software. And then you can query it and say, hey, you know what, these are the metadata characteristics I want to query and I want to look at where things are so I can be ready for the next audit or next calibration. Or even if you're taking these information with the contextual help and you are trying to set up another plant somewhere in a different location, that's something you can do because you already know what assets are, high value assets are, and what is the attribute of the asset as well. What other challenges exist? Yeah, that's a very good question. So the challenges in terms of when we start talking about digital twin and IoT and those kind of stuff, customers are very cautiously optimistic. That's the word I would use. They do have some kind of business case and they have heard about IoT. But in terms of digital twin and device twins and all this stuff, it's just seeping in. I mean, still there's a long way to go. So we need to be holding hands and walking with them. The biggest challenge comes in, hey, how do I converge my OT infrastructure with IT? That's one of the biggest challenges coming in. And then comes in is, technical skill set. What kind of technical skill set I need for OT infrastructure support? What are the things I need for sensors? What are the things for devices? And then how do I scale up for all my plants and warehouses? These are the core three things I would say as challenges. Thanks, guys.
Great. Just had that one of our attendees here asked a question on what type of sensor you're using for temperature, or was something specific or custom, or was it something like Raspberry? And plead my ignorance. I don't know what that sensor is, so I'll let you answer there, Jag.
Sure. So it depends too. It depends upon your environment setup and all this stuff. Of course, Raspberry Pi is one of the devices widely spoken, but it comes with its own limitations in terms of reliability and those kind of stuff. If you go into the marketplace, selection of the what we call as microcontroller units. These are. So there are microcontroller units. We need to basically, it's part of the gateways. We need to select that one, and sensors is a different thing. All these boils down to, your environment setup. Like basically, I would say, is going to have a Wi-Fi cellular connectivity? Is it going to be, how hot is your environment going to be? What is that you're really tracking? And are you doing a cloud, or are you doing an edge, and those kind of stuff? So it goes up. I mean, you can start, if you really want to get into in the space or something like that, you can start with so many ARM devices out there. Raspberry Pi is one of them. But if you really want to productionalize it, you're probably looking at other devices. I mean, there are some solutions which are available from third-party vendors. Instead of you building your own, you can go and buy them and then play with it and those kind of stuff. But if you really want to build to your own applications, I would say look at some other ARM devices. There are some Intel-based microcontrollers also. That's some of the things you can think through it too.
Okay, great. Thanks. Next. How quickly are we evaluating security posture for any organization? Kelly Stewart is the question too. And I think there's also a guest that had another security question we'll ask just after this that Brett will ask. Kelly Stewart?
Thanks. I think that can be answered in a way of understanding what's traditionally been done with assessments. I mean, when you're looking at security posture, typically you've gotten back to your client within, say, a month, 2 weeks to a month. Now you can truncate that schedule and even get back to him that day or even in a couple of days. Now, the reason I say that is typically what I do when you go through this process is you give a debrief or give an evaluation of what you're already seeing. And essentially all you're going to be doing is then writing up a report and giving it to them afterwards. But if you're able to show them immediately what they have to look and where your security posture has to go, then that actually truncates their schedule and time frame and budgeting based upon what you're doing. So a lot of that in terms of how's that evaluation go, it really condenses and makes things a little bit more efficient and effective with the given technology and software. And given that technology and software that we're discussing today also integrates with, say, the modeling features of BIM, the whole aspects with CAD and Revit, that really increases efficiency, has been demonstrated with a lot of the things in construction from a design perspective. So when you're looking at a lot of that, it really reduces the time and reduces the cost, which assists folks, I think, in determining what they want to do, not only from a security perspective, but just how they want to also achieve what the corporation wants to do.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, so we have a question from Dan, and just wanted to tell the audience, don't hesitate to put any questions either on the Q&A board or the chat board. But the question from Dan is, how is the actual photogrammetry data handled from a security standpoint, and where is it stored? How is access provided, et cetera?
Yeah, good question. So in the Visual Plan software, we are an AWS hosted application. There are role-based permissions at multiple levels. It's a fine grant, so we can share things at administrative levels right down to just sharing a very small area of just the tour. Everything's login based. There is an option to have a more secure application, AWS GovCloud. So there is some options to work with federal applications that may have more rigid applications and needs, or out-of-country applications for local hosting. So those are conversations we encourage to have with organizations should they have a need. Always there's a little bit extra cost for delivering data that way. But we're very, very careful on how we manage the data with the roles-based permissions, and the user really controls that access and can terminate that access at any time. Yeah, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions or comments.
Okay.
We had another one for Bavsh. Is she still
skip
around?
this one over here. We may have a
Kelly.
Okay. So what future opportunities do you see? I think the biggest impact that I see is the merging of, the physical environment with the live sensor and the response and the data queries. And I think that's a super important one, especially in the emergency management aspect, be able to get information into first responders' hands quickly and effectively, and to be able to respond to incidents. And that also goes into the world of responding if you're a tech or an engineer, to be able to respond to to do preventative maintenance or to respond to an overheating unit. Some of these units are going to be tens, hundreds of thousands, even up into millions in certain applications. So the quick response is critical. And I think we'll make this our last question with Jag and tie up. I know we went over today, and I appreciate everyone's time. And most people have still stayed on, which I can appreciate, but I'm sure other people have things to do. But Jag, you want to give us a couple more, a little bit more feedback on the kinds of internal skill sets organizations need to scale, what the scale up looks like, and cloud or edge?
Sure. These are good questions, guys. So what kind of internal skill sets organization need to help scale and support? I would say, like any other thing, it all depends. What do you want to do? So the thing is, if you wanted to support an end-to-end solution and you require definitely a high-level device and sensor knowledge, along with some cloud and big data expertise. But if you think, hey, you know what, I will take the SaaS solution and I will let the vendors do the heavy lifting in terms of sensors. I have the specs. I can provide the specs and I can work with them in terms of telemetry and those kind of cloud. I just want to work only on the integration piece. That's good. If you are looking from that perspective, just doing the integration piece, then all you need is a well-established some kind of business intelligence or analytics team where they can do the big data experience, and you're set to the horses, and you can move forward in that one. So those are two different approaches I would recommend. How do you scale up such a solution? That's a very good question. The thing is, first is IoT is a journey. So it's not like, it's definitely not like your ERP integration or ERP implementation, because it comes with a lot of variability. You have so much of choices and options. I'll give you, not only just from the sensor perspective, even from the gateway perspective, you need to think about, are you going to pay some licensing for Microsoft, or are you going to use, open source software? So I would say is always start with the small, start with a single site, right? And to help this kind of journey, we have a 12-point program, which starts with an assessment, POC, project plan, environmental setup. As we go through that journey, we will train your internal team into that journey. And then eventually, depending upon which choices you make to have an end-to-end solution, or you wanted to have a SaaS solution supporting integration, you will go over that. And once you have one site up and running, then you can replicate with other sites. And that's the way I would approach.
Right.
The last question is, do customers prefer cloud or edge? Again, this depends. It depends on what you want to do. If you already have a cloud environment set up and you are talking over tons of data, big data collection, and you have a lot of assets to be collected, and you're doing some predictive analytics and all those kind of stuff, so all these things matters and factors in. If you're not doing any predictive analytics and you are not collecting data, let's say you collect the data only once a day or something, I would say just go with the cloud. But if you're doing continuously monitoring, let's say you're collecting data and you have some kind of access to Wi-Fi, cellular or something, and you're collecting data like every 30 seconds or something, do all those things at the edge level, do the analytics on the edge level, and do the exceptions at the cloud level. That's some of the things I would recommend. Hopefully they answered the question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jag. We're going to go to the audience. I actually have, Bavsh is still on, so I actually want to squeeze a couple of quick questions out of him as he was able to stay on a little longer. From the audience, actually, we have a question that says, can you mention a little bit more about the importance of emergency management and having the ability to communicate effectively and efficiently in one solution for transparency and also for documentation purposes? So Bavsh, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of feedback on that, then we might have one more question for you as well.
Sure. I think from an emergency communication perspective and outbound communication, I think this visual plan plays a key role. If you think about from a crisis or emergency planning perspective, emergency preparedness perspective, you can not only visualize it, but you have all your text or your manuals, everything within visualized plan that you can bring up based on the areas or equipment or process or product that's being impacted. But beyond that, you have ability to integrate through other mass notification system to do mass communication out. So the ability to see one particular area, to ability to kind of take that, bring up your documentation within the same program, and then ability to communicate out. As Kelly mentioned earlier, you can send clips of it with the text messages and stuff like that. So you can now send those to a third party. It could be law enforcement personnel, emergency personnel. Ability to have this real time, show them what the inside area looks like from a fire rescue perspective. It brings a whole new level, a whole new perspective with this tool. And just in the emergency, one of my facility, I'm responsible for emergency response team, and we do have on-site emergency response teams. So this would be, this is where we're looking at one of the areas that this tool can add functionality. And
Great. Thanks, but and then one question on the slide here, looking forward, where do you feel IoT and AI will play in manufacturing? And then where would you like to see the industry go in terms of digital twins and IoT in the future?
I kind of touched on it earlier. We are a heavily manufacturer area, clean room area, shutdowns, and we can't really get into it. So IoT plays a key role in what we do today. The ability to tie those components into the area, and then what kind of Jack talked about earlier is about predictive analysis and maintenance, right? So you can now schedule these things and look at burn time of equipment compared to the manufacturing specs and things like that. So IoT plays a key role. I think overall there's a whole cybersecurity element of it that needs to be thought through, and that all depends on each organization and what their cybersecurity program is. But as more and more devices that get on the network, it brings a whole new perspective on cybersecurity from our point of view. And then the ability to AI. I think AI is just a heavily used word, but ability to look at that and sort of bring all that into it from a manufacturing perspective, it is great. Being in a manufacturing perspective, I do have to mention one thing is the validation word. The equipment needs to be validated and all that stuff. So that does throw a little bit of a curveball in the area of manufacturing, when you're looking at it from what we do. All equipment in the manufacturing has to be validated, which essentially means that the rev cycle, you're delayed between 8 months to 12 months from current, and you do have to have sort of development production environment. So when you look at that and look at it being in the cloud, all these things really need to be thought through. But I see IoT playing a key role, not only in the manufacturing, but day to day and in the security environment. An ability to take the AI component of it through all these sensor nets, as I call them, and bring it all in to do these behavioral analysis in the security realm I think is where the future is headed.
Excellent. Kelly Stewart, we want to give you a last question here and tie up here. Go ahead. You can read it. What's the paradigm shift? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the paradigm shift as it pertains to security? Well, I think the paradigm shift, quite frankly, is a process aspect. It's the process from before is now enhanced, made more efficient, made more effective, just from the basis of the technology being used. Always bear in mind from our perspective, either practitioner or consultant or what you're looking at, you're using tools. So are those tools assisting you in making sure that things are being done properly, but also you have the right things in place in order to not only operate your business effectively and efficiently, but also protect it as well. So the paradigm shift, I believe, is going from seeing things more dynamically as opposed to seeing things from a very one myopic viewpoint or one lens or a shot in time, which has been done in the past. Because with the digital twin or even with this technology, you're able to have, once again, a 360-degree situational awareness viewpoint. And you're able to see other aspects that may affect whatever you're trying to protect or whatever you're trying to do. And that just changes the whole entire picture of things as opposed to the way it was done in the past.
Excellent. And I think that's great. I appreciate everyone that stayed on the extra time here. Obviously, there was some great conversations and appreciate the speakers and their experience. So thank you for coming on. Just a quick summary, in terms of Visual Plan, we are a collaboration software platform that compiles all things CAD, 3D, and we manage the digital twins to compare, collaborate, and share. And that we process 360 imagery to govern that change throughout the life cycle of a building. And working with live sensors and whatnot are something we're very keen on. So please reach out for a demonstration. Next slide, Brett. Brett, we have some contact information for the speakers. So feel free to reach out to myself for a demonstration or Jag. And Kelly has an excellent newsletter. And if you have anything on a risk consulting basis, he is one of the industry's best. So feel free to reach out to him directly. And we will be sending out the slides and the recording from today's session to everyone that has signed up. So we're happy to get that out to you. And if we didn't get to your question in this session, we will answer those questions afterwards. And we look forward to next month's webinar. And we'll be posting the topic on that very soon. But thank you very much for everyone. Thank you, Kelly, Jag, Bavsh, and look forward to the next webinar.